Welcome to Research Methodology. Today, we are diving into one of the most fundamental distinctions in any scientific investigation: quantitative versus qualitative research. Whether you are studying animal behavior in zoology or analyzing clinical trials, understanding how to collect and interpret different types of data is absolutely essential. By the end of this lesson, you will know exactly when to count things with numbers and when to explore them with words. Let us get started. To begin, let us imagine you are trying to decide whether to watch a new movie. You might look at the average rating, perhaps an 8 out of 10, based on thousands of votes. This numerical rating is exactly like quantitative research. It gives you a broad, measurable, and objective summary. But to understand exactly why people liked it, you would read the written reviews, detailing the acting or visual effects. These descriptive reviews represent qualitative research, providing deep, meaningful context that numbers alone simply cannot capture. Now that we have a basic intuition, let us look at the formal definitions, starting with quantitative research. In the academic world, this is defined as a systematic investigation of observable phenomena using statistical, mathematical, or computational techniques. The primary goal here is to gather numerical data. This data can then be transformed into usable statistics to measure variables and test specific hypotheses. Whenever your research asks questions like how many or how much, you are firmly in the territory of quantitative research. Having defined the numerical approach, we must now understand its counterpart. Qualitative research is defined as an exploratory methodology used to understand underlying reasons, opinions, and motivations. Instead of numbers, it relies heavily on non-numerical data. This includes text, audio, or video collected through methods like open-ended interviews and focus groups. While quantitative research counts things, qualitative research seeks to answer why and how a certain phenomenon occurs, giving us the rich human context behind the raw data. Understanding the distinction between these two approaches is absolutely critical, because choosing the wrong method can completely ruin a study. For instance, if a pharmaceutical company wants to know if a new drug lowers blood pressure, they must use quantitative research to measure exact numerical changes in patients. However, if a psychologist wants to understand the emotional trauma of losing a loved one, forcing patients to fill out a numerical survey would be highly inappropriate. Qualitative research is essential here to capture deeply personal human experiences through open conversation. Because quantitative research relies heavily on statistics, let us look at its most fundamental mathematical tool, the arithmetic mean. Conceptually, this formula allows researchers to take hundreds of individual data points and condense them into a single representative number. In plain words, x bar represents the sample mean we want to find. The variable n is the total number of observations. The symbol x sub I represents each individual data point, and the Greek letter sigma tells us to add them all up. If the sample size n increases, the mean becomes a much more reliable representation of the population, reducing the impact of extreme outliers. Now that we have our formula, let us apply it to a real scenario. Imagine a researcher surveying 5 customers about their restaurant meal on a scale from 1 to 10. We are given the scores 6, 8, 9, 7, and 10, and we need to find the overall average. First, we identify our total number of observations, which is 5. Next, we substitute our individual scores into the numerator to add them all together, keeping our sample size of 5 in the denominator. Adding the scores gives us 40 divided by 5. Our final answer is 8. This tells the manager that customers are highly satisfied on average. We just calculated a clear numerical average, which is great, but it leads us to an important realization. The restaurant manager now knows the average score is an 8, but they still do not know exactly why the customers gave these ratings. Was the food too cold? Was the service exceptional? This perfectly highlights the limitation of using numbers without qualitative context. It shows exactly why follow-up interviews might be necessary to uncover the reasons behind the scores. To bridge this gap between words and numbers, researchers often convert qualitative themes into quantitative percentages. This formula comes from the concept of relative frequency, allowing us to quantify subjective human experiences. Let us break down the symbols. The variable p represents the final percentage we are calculating. The variable f stands for frequency, which is the exact number of times a specific qualitative theme appeared in our text. Finally, n represents the total number of qualitative interviews conducted. By dividing the frequency by the total and multiplying by 100, we turn descriptive words into universally understood metrics. Let us see this conversion formula in action with a concrete example. Suppose a researcher conducts in-depth qualitative interviews with 40 university students about their main sources of stress. After reading the transcripts, they find that 24 students explicitly mention financial debt. We want to calculate the percentage of students sharing this theme. We set our total interviews, n, to 40, and our frequency, f, to 24. Substituting these into our formula, we divide 24 by 40 to get a decimal proportion of 0.60. Multiplying by 100 gives us our final answer of 60%. This means 60% of the interviewed students experience financial stress. Now that we have calculated both types of data, let us look at a visual representation of these two methodologies. On the left side of the diagram, you see the quantitative approach, represented by a structured bar chart. Notice the clear axes for time and value, surrounded by mathematical symbols. This represents hard numbers and statistical significance. On the right side, the qualitative approach is shown as a complex web of interconnected thoughts. The nodes are labeled with words like experience, context, and feeling. This perfectly illustrates how qualitative research maps out the messy, interconnected reality of human emotions and motivations that a simple bar chart cannot capture. This visual comparison brings us to a crucial realization about research design. Quantitative and qualitative research are not enemies. They are fundamentally different but highly complementary approaches to discovering the truth. Quantitative research provides the hard numbers, statistical significance, and broad patterns needed to make objective decisions. Meanwhile, qualitative research provides the human context, deep emotional insights, and detailed explanations. In the real world, a masterful researcher knows exactly when to use each method, and very often combines them to create a complete, undeniable picture of the phenomenon being studied. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us review the most important ideas. First, remember that quantitative research is all about measuring numerical data to test specific hypotheses, answering how much. Second, qualitative research explores non-numerical data, like text and interviews, to understand the why and how behind human behavior. We also learned how to calculate the arithmetic mean for quantitative data, and how to use relative frequency to convert qualitative themes into measurable percentages. You now have a solid foundation in both methodologies, empowering you to choose the right tools for your future research projects.